I want to show people the real life of a professional designer, the projects that I work on, how I work on them, how I make decisions, the challenges I run into along the way. That's the kind of thing that I'm looking to share. And that sort of lens frames all of my content, like not just on YouTube. That is also the newsletter, the book, anything I tweet as well. It sort of all comes from this.
In this episode, I talked to Charli Prangley. Charli is the creative director at, ConvertKit. So she and I have actually worked together for 4.5 years. And during that time, before she joined ConvertKit, she'd built a popular YouTube channel about design and specifically marketing design. She's at over 200 or right about 200,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is incredible. She's got all kinds of projects. So in this episode, we dive into things about design. She and I are both designers, and so we love those topics. We talk about side hustles and how you balance that with a full-time job, like her career, moving up the ladder, becoming creative director at ConvertKit, but also all the other things that she wants to create, what gives you energy, what doesn't. We talk about sharing things about money online and how that can be a tough topic. And so she shares her income. She does videos about salaries, about income from side hustles, all of that. So we talk about those details. And then we talk about, as a newsletter creator, is YouTube something that you might want to pursue, and tips and tricks and ideas for that. So anyway, I'll get out of the way and we'll dive into the episode. Charli, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited, honored to be on the Nathan Barry Show.
That's right. I'm glad that it gets that kind of, enthusiasm.
Yeah.
That's good. Is that only because we've worked together for so long?
Maybe, honestly, actually, I'd probably be more excited to be on if we hadn't worked together for so long.
That's right. You're actually like, fine, I'll come on your podcast. But to be clear, I'm doing it during work hours and you're paying for this.
And this is a favor to you. No.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas separately, if we hadn't spent the last, 4 years working together, then you'd actually really want to do it. All right. Well, maybe let's start there, because we have spent the last 4 years working together. 4.5, really.
Yeah, more like 4.5.
Yeah. So approaching 5 this fall. The first thing that I want to ask you about is how you think about all the different things that you're doing as a creator. As I mentioned in the intro, you've got, the YouTube channel, you have podcasts, you have a newsletter and everything else. And I just love to hear how you think about the intersection of those things. And then we can get into the intersection of a full-time role and all the full-time creator things. So what's the Charli's creator landscape?
Ooh, I like that. I would say that I'm aiming to make the kind of content that would have helped out, the me from 2 years ago. And that's kind of been my approach the whole time through. So when I started, maybe I was making stuff more for beginners, and every now and then I will still, but I'm trying to level up my audience as well as I level up in my career. And I love the term creator. I feel like it's definitely the best way to describe me, because I'm not just a YouTuber. I'm not just a podcaster or just a blogger or a writer or whatever. I do all the things wherever I feel drawn to create, and whichever method I feel like will best express the thing that I'm trying to teach or share is what I lean into.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's how I feel like. You can't put me in a box.
Yeah, no. How dare you?
The only box that I'm willing to accept is a giant, all-encompassing, free-form box of creator.
That molds and changes shape as you do. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so you have all of these things. Maybe your most recent thing that I want to talk about is inside marketing or inside marketing design, really. Inside marketing would be an entirely different.
Yes.
We're talking inside marketing design. I'd love to hear first why you wanted to start that, and maybe to seed the direction a little bit. I've heard you talk about design being so focused. People either talk graphic design or they talk product design, and so we're into user experience and user interface. I'm curious how marketing design fits into that and your desires there.
Yeah. So honestly, inside marketing design started as much of my content does, which is I wish this existed. It doesn't exist. Maybe I'll be the one to make it. I
Yep.
found myself just like really wanting to hear about how other companies set up their marketing design teams, how their marketing designers get work done. And when you searched around for like, I don't know, Medium articles and things like that, it's all about product design. It's all about product design teams, UX design teams, and how they work with engineers. And I'm like, what about the marketing design side of things? It's super important, especially in tech, where most marketing, happens online, and you need the digital design to make that happen. A brand is super important for building up a company to, a high level. And I just think it's completely underappreciated, marketing design in the industry. And so it's like my personal mission to raise up the profile of marketing design in the eyes of the wider design industry and tech industry. And yeah, Inside Marketing Design is an interview show that was completely self-indulgent, where I got on calls with designers who work at other tech companies and learned about how they did their work.
I feel like the best podcasts and newsletters and things like that are completely self-indulgent because they come from this natural curiosity. Like that's where this show comes from. It's just like, these are the people that I want to talk to, and they'll be more likely to say yes to talk to me if it's for a podcast, because otherwise, like, you end up in the "can I pick your brain"
Yes.
thing, and that's
Yep.
like, nope, no. Like that goes in a very special bucket of emails. But if you're like, "Can I have you on your podcast?" You're asking 90% the same thing, and the best questions are the ones where I'm like, I genuinely want to know this.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. That's definitely the approach I take to it. And since then, I've been surprised by the response, that the number of people who were also interested in this very specific niche thing I was interested in as well. It definitely has a way smaller audience than if it was perhaps a product design podcast or a UX design podcast. But that's kind of the point, right? Is that I want to make content for this niche, this very underserved, I believe, niche in particular.
What's interesting is that I feel like the market exists. Like, obviously there's lots of marketing designers, right? Because
Yeah.
we're all going to every time Stripe comes out with a feature, it's
Yes.
the most beautiful page ever, and all this, right? We look at even just within the niche of software, like all of the design is so beautiful today compared to what it was even 5 years ago. And so obviously there's marketing designers everywhere. It's just that the content hasn't caught up with that. For whatever reason, I feel like the UX designers and the freelancers have been so much more prolific in like content of, this is how I run my business, and this is how we structure our teams. And so it feels to me like the market, it's not that the market is small, it's that just not established yet. There's not as big of a community.
Yep, totally. And there's not even one specific term, like even marketing design. Some companies would call it brand design, some would call it just web design, the creative team. I don't know, there's lots of different terms for it. So yeah, I guess I'm also trying to like unify us all under this marketing design umbrella as well, because it's design that helps market a product or service.
Yeah, totally. And it takes someone to say like, hey, this is the term that we're all using, just in case you're wondering. Oh, that, what you mean is marketing design. So who are some people that you've had on the podcast that, or particular companies that you've interviewed where you're like, we're really excited to dive in and learn what they were doing?
Yeah, so I was really excited to have Adam Stoddard from Basecamp on the first season, back when he was still at Basecamp. And I don't know, it was just really interesting to learn about how they do things. Same with Webflow, had Johnny Gomez from Webflow on. I've been a big fan of Webflow for a very long time. And so yeah, digging in and hearing more about the day-to-day, because it's one thing to just look at a company's marketing site or their marketing materials, and it's another to hear about the process they went into producing it, and like, where does this designer sit within the org structure of the company? How do they do things? So yeah, we go into lots of nerdy details like that, and it's been fun. I feel like I've learned from, doing the episodes myself. Like one thing that Johnny actually brought up is that when he's designing sites for Webflow, he will write the copy for them as well. Like, he doesn't use lorem ipsum or filler copy. He'll like write real copy. And I would usually write like sort of like a placeholder copy that indicated what I wanted to say. Like, it would be like headline about this. But since that interview with Johnny, I've leaned in more to like, okay, let me just try it. Let me just try write a headline. And, the writer can come in and fix it up later if they want to. But yeah, there's been lots of cool little learnings that have helped me in my process. And yeah, I hope has helped the audience too.
That's interesting. I feel like people do this with every skill that they don't feel confident in. I was going to say competent, but often they're competent in skills that they don't
Yeah,
actually like. Competent and confident,
different.
uh,
Yeah.
don't always coexist. And so I think that with design, there's a lot of people who are like, "Oh, that's design. I can't. Like, I'm not a designer. I can't touch it." And I'm always trying to use tools like Figma of like gradually draw people in of like, "Oh, but what if you tried?" And
Yeah.
like, yeah, maybe it looks terrible, but here's this process. And I feel like copywriting is one of those things where people are like, I don't know how to do that. I'm not a copywriter. I'm a designer. I'm whatever else. And it's like, okay, but if you had to, what would this headline say? Oh, it would probably say something like this.
Mhm.
Okay. Like that's probably 70% there. And then like if you had to write a better one, what would it say? Oh, maybe it'd be this. And that being able to jump in, like you'll find often that you're competent um, even before you're confident in those skills.
Yeah.
So you've got the podcast. Well, actually, really quick, you said something about the podcast. You mentioned seasons.
Oh, yes.
How do you think about doing it in seasons, and how does that fit into like your workflow?
Yeah, I wanted to do it in seasons because this is actually my second podcast. I have one called Design Life that I've been running with a co-host for years, and that is not one with seasons. It's sort of like an every week thing, although we are on a break at the moment. And I just
Like
know
a
how much
Ross and
work it
Rachel
is.
style break, or what kind of break?
No, we're on like a summer break.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
So everyone knows you're on a break. It's not like you
Yes.
think you're on a break and your co-host doesn't think you are. Okay,
Yeah,
that's good.
exactly.
Sorry, I've been watching Friends lately. I can't help it.
So I knew that I wanted to do inside marketing design in seasons because of just how much work it is to do a podcast constantly. I thought I could package, like have my goal was 10 to 12 interviews to collate them into a season and also do a wrap-up episode at the end of the season, just covering some of the things that I learned, some highlights, things like that to tie a little bow on it. And I'm starting the prep work for season 2 right now. My goal is to do one season a year of 10 to 12 episodes each.
Nice. What I like about that is you're able to be deliberate about what you're committing to. You can start it when you actually have like energy and momentum towards it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's also a fixed commitment. So you're like
Yes.
saying, I don't know what the analogy is. Like you're not even hopping on the treadmill. Or if you are, you're like, this is a 5-mile run or this is a 3-mile run or whatever, right? And then you're like, and then I'm going to hop off instead of being like, hey, I'm going to get on this treadmill and I'm going to do it until I get burnt out and regret doing it. And then I'll quit about 3 months after that.
Yep, exactly that. And I would compare it more to a marathon than a 5-mile run, but just to get technical.
Yeah, exactly. Some of us are more ambitious than others. So what's the, like going back to the creator landscape, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of in your world, you've got the podcast. It seems like that is the main driver, the main source of new content for inside marketing design. But you've also got a newsletter, a job board, and then a book coming. So how do you think about the other aspects?
Yeah, so the newsletter I started, honestly, I feel like it was from something that I'd seen you write, talking about like building up your authority on, it was probably in authority actually, now that I think about it, building up your authority on a topic before you're going to release, a paid product about it. And so I thought, well, this would be a really great way for me to generate like a warm audience of people who are interested in marketing design if I start a marketing design newsletter. So it's called the Marketing Design Dispatch and it goes out on Mondays and, sometimes it's like a little essay. Maybe it's like even a piece of writing that I've been doing for the book that I'm writing about marketing design. Or maybe it's a deep dive into analyzing a new marketing website that I've seen, a rebrand, something like that, as well as sharing content that has been useful for me or that I've seen around the internet. I've had a good response to it so far because I started just sending it out to my existing list and I gave people the option to opt out of getting it if they didn't want to. And maybe like a couple hundred people did that. But the majority of my list has stayed around for it, which has been cool.
Yeah. So how big is that list? And where did that existing list come from?
So the current list is 18,000 subscribers. I just did a big cold subscriber cull the other day. It was up to like 24,000. And so, my engagement graph in ConvertKit's looking nice and green at the moment.
Nice.
And the majority of my list previously had come from one, I had this really popular YouTube video about DIY screen printing. And so people sign up to my list to get a free opt-in that has like a PDF written with the instructions. So those are the ones that, probably went cold, let's be honest. But,
Yeah.
I also have a couple of other opt-ins about creating a design system for a marketing website, how to advocate for yourself as a designer, self-promotion as a designer, just a few sort of like things I've created along the way, as well as just a general sign up on my website. So yeah, most people are there because they're interested in my content, I guess.
And so probably a lot of that is coming from either Twitter, but the bulk of it being from YouTube. Is that right?
A lot from YouTube, also a lot from my own website and from Twitter, I would say. Yeah.
Okay, so you've got the newsletter there. And then this is actually something that I was genuinely curious about. Like, why launch a job board? That feels like another, you're already juggling a bunch of things.
Yes.
Like how,
Great point.
how does that fit in?
Yeah. So the job board came about, honestly, because of the platform that I have it on. It's called Palette. And it's a way that communities can create a job board to advertise roles to their community. So it's quite like creator focused, and it's meant to be heavily curated. So it's not like you come to my board and you find any type of design role. It's like a job board specifically for marketing design and brand design roles. And so, yeah, it's my goal to have it be the place that if you're looking for that type of role, you come search on here. And if you're hiring for it, you come post on my job board because you know that I'm going to send it out to my audience of people who are interested in this topic. And like, it just feels like a good fit.
Right.
It's been pretty low lift so far, honestly. So that's another reason why I took it on, because it wasn't like I had to make the site myself or anything. Palette has the system, and they manage the payments for the job postings and things like that. I just go in when one gets submitted and see if I want to approve it, and it gets posted.
Nice. Yeah, I've noticed other people. There's a creator who I hope to have on the podcast soon named Sahil Bloom, who has like a couple 100,000 followers on Twitter, a popular newsletter and all of that. And he just launched a board called Bloom Board, which I think is a great
name.
I chuckled, and so it's just interesting as a business model because right when you have this audience of tens of thousands or even more, that's really what you're selling access to. And it's interesting, like I'm used to selling products to individual creators where $50 or $100 or $200 is enough money that people are thinking hard about it. But what's interesting about a job board is that, especially one in the tech world, where someone is like, hey, can you help me find this person that I'm going to pay somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000 a year? And so like I assume I don't know what your experience is, but the willingness to pay for that product is fairly high, and they're really paying for access to your 18,000 subscriber newsletter.
Yeah, exactly. And I also have a tier on the job board where you can choose to pay like a much higher fee. And I mention it in a YouTube video as well that goes out to my audience of like 200,000 on there. And so it just seems like, a smart idea. No one's taken me up on that option yet, but I hope in time they will.
Well, if nothing else, it's there for like package it, like positioning in there of like, well, maybe we dive in. What are the price points right now at the time of recording?
Oh, shoot. I can't remember off the top of my head. Let me look it up quickly.
Or Google it. That's okay too.
I'm just going to go to my own job board. How about that? So I think it's $300 for an initial, like just a plain posting.
Yeah.
$500 for featured, which then has like a special section of my newsletter as well. And then I believe I priced it at like $1,200 for the one that includes the YouTube shout out, which is like in line with what I charge YouTube sponsors. It's actually a lot cheaper than what I charge YouTube sponsors, but I figure it's a good fit and it's doing service to my community to be promoting it as well. So yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so what was the research that you did going into like? I imagine it was more than like, oh, Palette looks interesting. Great, let's add this monetization method. What went in as you were seeing of like, okay, I have this community and a job board is the way that I want to monetize it because I saw these people do it, or I saw,
That was the reason why. Yep. It was mostly my friend Femke, who was my co-host on the Design Life podcast. She had started one with Palette, and I saw her doing it. And I was like, oh, this looks interesting. Like, tell me more about this. And she said that Palette had approached her and explained the system. So yeah, I reached out to them, got on a call with them. They're super like new as a startup, basically. And so, we're in on the ground floor and helping them along the way with building features and, suggesting what to build, that sort of thing in their Slack group. And I just decided this makes more sense than trying to build and maintain a website of my own because they are doing that work. And, as someone who creates on the side of a full-time job, leading a team at ConvertKit, I, want to have this be minimal effort on my part to get it out there. So it just made sense.
So you're not very far into this, right? Or
No, it's brand new. I've only had like one person pay to post so far. It's very new.
Yeah, we're just getting started. And so maybe this is a better question for like at some point in the future. But like if someone was coming to you and saying like, okay, I have a newsletter of 10 or 20,000 subscribers, is like, should I consider a job board as well? Like as a monetization method, what would your perspective be at this stage?
Right. Yeah. I think that is a good question that I can definitely answer now. I would say if your niche for your newsletter is super clear and there's like a certain type of people who read it or that you're speaking to when you write it, it could make sense to have a job board. There was some initial effort for me in finding some jobs to populate the board with so it wasn't launching with nothing, But from then on, it feels like very low commitment because it's mostly inbound, right? It's people coming to you to post. So it's not going to be worth it for you if you don't have perhaps the profile in the community yet to get those inbound leads or, get people visiting your board so that you have the good stats to tell people about. But yeah, if you do have those things, consider it as an extra income stream. I think it's smart to add, like diversify where your income is coming from. That was a big thing that led to me, we haven't got into this yet, but last year I doubled the income that I made from my side hustles, and having like multiple small streams is how I did it rather than having like one giant successful stream, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'm considering the job board as part of that.
Yeah, I want to get into the side hustles as well. Maybe before we do that, well, no, let's just go right there now. I guess the first thing that I'm curious about is you share all of your numbers transparently publicly, something that I do as well. And you also dive in, like you have popular videos on like salaries for designers, your own salary history. Like one of my favorite videos that you've put together is like, here's the salary that I've had at every role, across my
and every raise that career. I had throughout my career. Yep.
Yeah. And so why that level of transparency?
Nathan, I feel like you're fishing for compliments, even though you don't realize you are. But it's honestly, it's because I got a lot of value from reading your income reports, seeing people like Pat Flynn's income reports as well. And I think it changed my mindset on money. It's something that we are taught that it has a taboo around it, right? And we all keep it secret for some reason because everyone else does. And so we think we have to as well. And I don't know, I guess just seeing other people share and seeing the value that I got from it and seeing how it didn't change my perception of them. If anything, it made me respect them more. I was like, well, I feel like I am confident in what I'm earning and I'm confident that I'm being paid what I'm worth. So why don't I just share this history with other people and tell them about it? And yeah, since then, I feel like I've slowly gotten more and more transparent. And the latest income report on my blog is the most transparent I've ever been. And no regrets.
It's something that comes up, like the reason I asked the question, other than fishing for compliments, which I'm absolutely doing, like, unashamedly. The reason that I ask is because I think so many people are so timid about it. And so I want like to have more of a conversation, not about like just the like bold, brave people who are out there doing it, but like just to try to normalize it so much more. And so I'm curious, what have been some of the downsides? Like there's got to be at least some YouTube comments or some emails or something. And so maybe we can share a little bit about what the outside edge of like, hey, this is the downside, rather than just telling everyone like, oh, it was fine.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I would love to hear this from you as well. I've had YouTube comments on both ends of the spectrum to the salary video in particular. Some saying, this is irresponsible to tell people this is their rate. They're going to set them way too low. If they go and asking for what your salary is, you're being underpaid, that sort of thing.
Yep.
Probably the people who live in San Francisco and work at like a Google or a Facebook or something like that. I don't know.
It turns out you make like $500,000 a year, like something crazy. You have to sell your soul. That's the only like,
that's the caveat.
But other than that, like you're good.
So I've had those people. I've also had the people saying like, oh my gosh, that's like so much money. Design is like way overvalued. There's people who are like, saving lives in hospitals. And I'm like, yeah, that's a fair freaking point. I won't swear on your podcast, but great point that maybe the answer isn't we should pay designers less, but maybe we should pay doctors and nurses more,
Okay.
let's take that approach to it. But honestly, less of that than I expected is what I've seen. Maybe those sort of comments are happening in a less public forum. Like maybe people are talking about me behind my back. I don't know, but
Probably not.
yeah, well,
I would
yeah, who
guess.
knows? But either way, the people who I care about, I haven't heard that from.
Right.
I will say one interesting thing I noticed is that since sharing my salary history and things, whenever I'll like offer to buy my family dinner or like, I don't know, we'll be out, be like, I'll pay, they protest less now. We'll just say that.
Well, that was going to be my next question, is how it interacts with family.
Yeah.
And so now it sounds like they're just like
They're like, that's okay. Yeah, we understand. She can afford it.
they say like, no, we can split it or something, but they only say it once instead of like
Yeah. Yeah, they don't protest too hard. What about you? What have been some of the like the positives and negatives you've had?
Yeah, I mean, lots of positives, because I feel like the more transparent you are, the more people read your content, the more they enjoy it, the more they understand you. And so the more they want to connect. Like, so the number of people who I really respect and am a fan of, who have reached out and been like, oh, let's chat. And I'm like, I'm like playing it cool. I'm like, yeah, that'd be great. I've like seen your stuff on Twitter. And really, it's like, no, I've listened to every episode of your podcast, or like some version of that, right? And it's like, be cool, Nathan, So there's been a lot of that. On the downsides, let's see. I would say this was more early on, right? Because I've been transparent with numbers for the last eight years or so. But especially, I got started in online business when I was really young, and so in the communities that like friends from high school or church, or or my wife Hillary's friends, like in those circles, a lot of people were much earlier in their careers. And
Mm,
so there was a time that, people were making 25, 30, maybe $40,000 a year in those circles. And then over here, I'm like, if they ask me what I do, I'm like, oh, I'm a writer, or I'm a blogger, or something like that. But on my blog, I'm talking about how like I made $250,000 last year.
right. Yeah.
Right. And so there were a few awkward times when those worlds like crossed.
Hmm.
And it was, yeah, but that was a long time ago.
And how did you handle it when they did cross though? Like, how did you handle the situation or the awkward conversations?
Yeah. Well, I remember one person in particular is one of, we aren't very good friends with them anymore. Not because of this, but just like
Okay,
drifting
just to
apart.
clarify. Yeah.
But it was one of my wife's friends' husbands. It's one of
Hmm.
those things where like you go to a party and for whatever reason, everyone segregates by gender. And you're like, what? Why do we do this? But
Is this a
like,
middle school dance? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It was one of those things where someone who was genuinely interested in learning online business, and that sort of thing in the group, and like followed my blog and understood it, was like asking questions about like, oh, how did this latest launch go? And I was like answering the questions, but I was just getting this feeling of like awkwardness
Mm,
from this other person. And so it was like I always try to be transparent, but I was struggling to reconcile like in-person Nathan with online Nathan at that time.
yes. Yep.
I'm glad that resonates.
Yeah.
Like,
Totally. Yeah.
it was totally normal to be able to talk about like a book launch or something um, online, but to talk about it in person of like, oh, this made like $40,000 in the course of a couple of days, was a really weird thing to say. So I like danced around it and kind of said it. And from this other person got like just a straight up like, oh, wouldn't that be nice to just like
Yeah.
send an email and make all this money and not have to work for it.
Well, you're like, well, I did the work in advance though. So
Yeah, exactly. That's not the moment where you're like, be like, well, let's take a step back and let me get out the whiteboard and
Hmm.
like, let's explain leverage and how you build on, like wrong vibe. And I just kind of shut down. I didn't know how to navigate that situation. So I did it poorly, like kind of laughed it off. Someone else like felt the tension in the group and like made a joke and took the conversation some other way. And,
Yeah.
that was probably the most like awkward
Mm.
scenario that I've ever had. I think I have the same thing that you do of like family is now like, okay, yeah, no, you can, that's fine. We'll let you pay for that.
Yeah.
Um, which is honestly one of my, like, I like
Yeah.
paying for things
Same. I
and
wouldn't
all of
offer
them.
if I didn't want to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and my family's been fantastic about all of that.
I think another thing that I've noticed is, I don't know, like, I think if you're going to start talking about money online, you can decide how much you want to share, right? Just because you're being transparent about something doesn't mean you owe anyone anything more than what you decide you want to share. So for me, I share my income and I shared my business expenses, like the content production expenses this year. But I don't talk about like, oh, here's everything I paid in tax. There's everything that I paid to like live my life, or I don't know. Like there's some things that I'm not interested in talking about online. And I don't know. I started out giving people excuses when they would like push for more and more and more. But now I kind of feel like I've given you a lot. Like, you take that and run with it. Like
Right.
it shouldn't matter to you. My answer when people ask me, well, how much did you pay in taxes? And I just say, I paid the correct amount. Yeah. I mean,
I like that.
what benefit does it have to you to know this? You're not living in my exact situation, so I don't understand like how it would help. So,
Right.
I decided that's not a thing that I want to talk about, and I am fine with that. And maybe some people aren't, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great boundary, and that's something probably that I haven't talked about this, on this podcast, that I'm curious for your answer on is what boundaries have you set in your like personal versus
Mm,
professional like creator life, right? Because there are definitely people who would look at you and I and be like, oh God, I could never like put myself out there in those ways. Like I would never show up on camera. I wouldn't talk about my life. I wouldn't put things on the internet under my real name.
mm.
Like everyone has these different boundaries. And so I'm curious, like what are some of yours and how have you set those over time?
Yeah, I think over time I've settled more into my content that I put out online being very focused on my work. And
Hmm.
obviously who I am showing up to do my work, who I am as a designer, but I don't share a lot of my personal life online. I'll share like the odd Instagram story here and there, pictures of my cats, that sort of thing. But you're not going to find me, for example, vlogging on the weekend being like,
Right.
"Oh, now I'm just hanging out with my boyfriend watching Formula 1." That's not the kind of content I'm trying to make. I'm just trying to make design focused. This is my work. This is my process. This is how I get it done. Sort of content. I did used to vlog more of the personal side of things, and it was fun. And it's fun to have those videos to look back on. But it's also a lot. Like as much as you try to live in the moment while also capturing it, your attention is always going to be split some way. And
Right.
so, that's just a decision I made, was to take more time offline when I'm not working and just document the work as what I share. Has been a good split for me that works for me and my life, my family.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like it's something that people probably do both what you and I have done of like not really having those clear boundaries, and then you just gradually figure them out and
Yeah,
set them over
you
time.
figure out what works for
I think
you.
there are people who, have things like, oh, I will never put um like my kid's face
Mm,
on online or something like that, right? Um I think like Casey Neistat has
yeah.
that where like the like certain clips they'll be blurred or
hmm
they're
Just
like,
from
oh,
behind
they're
the back of
walking
the head.
through
Yeah.
New York. Yeah, exactly. It's the back of the head, or you're like, oh,
Yeah.
there's a kid in a stroller that you can't really see,
Yeah.
and it's just interesting to try to navigate that. So I appreciate people who are intentional, and I think I just haven't. There's a lot of things that I haven't figured out exactly, and you'll see how it changes over time.
Mhm.
Because I think what you're comfortable with, with the YouTube channel of 1,000 or 10,000 subscribers is different than what you're comfortable with at 200,000.
Yeah. And that changes over time too. Something I recently started doing this year is streaming my work, streaming on
Hmm.
Twitch. And I don't know, I'd been very resistant to doing live streams in the past because I was just nervous about having people watch me design. Yeah, maybe it was imposter syndrome I was feeling, or I don't know, just worried about people judging me when they're seeing my
Right.
messy middle of the process rather than me presenting like this final thing that I've finished and it looks great. And that was a fun challenge to overcome, honestly. It's been a really fun way to build community over on Twitch, like diversifying my audience in a way from not just being focused on YouTube or Twitter, but building small audiences elsewhere. It's been cool.
Okay, so you said diversify, which is interesting, and I like that. Um, do you worry about it diluting your efforts and diluting your audience of picking up another channel or platform?
Kind of, but also no. So I have this person in my mind who is like my creator idol. You've probably heard of her, Jessica Heish. She
Uh-huh.
is a designer, a letterer, illustrator, and I'm just such a big fan of her work and in how she shows up online. In that she's just doing cool stuff all the time. Well, that's what it feels like anyway. Like
Right.
doing cool things, putting it out there. You wouldn't call her a blogger or I don't know, like just a speaker or just someone on Twitter. Like she's all of those things. And she just like shows up in different ways to share different pieces of her work. That's what I'm trying to do. I don't want to be known as just a YouTuber and lock myself into that. And I feel like I did for a while. And it's only really been probably in the last year that I feel like I've pulled out of that. And that's not how I mostly hear people describe me anymore. But yeah, I'm just trying to show up online and share things. And yeah, maybe I could be more successful in terms of building a bigger audience if it was just focused on YouTube, for example. But that's not my end goal, right? So it doesn't serve me, and I'm more interested in just being a well-rounded person. Like I call it a digital citizen. This is what I did my honors degree project about, so I'm a bit nerdy about it. But yeah, I like being a digital citizen and giving stuff to the internet.
Yeah, I like it. Well, so maybe if we dive in a little bit on YouTube, since that is where the bulk of your audience,
Yes.
has come from and all of that. Um, what were the things like as you look back over the last, 200,000 subscribers? What were the things that made the biggest impact of
Mm,
either any step functions in growth or um, particular videos or really just habits that have
yep.
have paid off over time?
I think it's mostly been habits, honestly. There's only one sort of step point in my growth that I can point to is when I was featured on a list of the design channels to follow on YouTube. And that gave me like a big boost. But most of my
How
growth
big
on
of a
YouTube, I can't remember now, several thousand, like more than what I
okay.
would usually get. It was significant, like a difference
Was
in the
that
graph.
when you were at like 10,000, 50,000?
I can't even remember now. I feel like probably around like 20,000 ish,
Okay.
maybe.
So we're talking a significant boost at this point is like
Yes.
10%,
Yes.
20%.
Yes. In like within a week sort of thing. Felt like major that I started to see those numbers increase. But most of my growth on YouTube has been like slow and steady, just like climbing up over time. For the first 5 years of being on YouTube, you mentioned habits. I didn't miss a single week of uploading for 5 freaking years. I don't know how I did it now. I miss weeks all the time now. But
Right.
yeah, that really helped me get in the habit of making videos, get in the habit of having an idea, figuring out how to express it, learning how to edit, putting it out there, getting a response, making it better next time. Um, I think if I'd stressed a lot about my first, however many videos I made in those 5 years, I would have taken a lot longer to grow if I'd been trying to perfect each one. But instead, I was just like, no, what matters is getting something out there. So I'm going to get something out there. And that was a huge part in building my consistency. Then the other thing I think I'd say helped is deciding who I'm talking to on YouTube. I started out making content about a bunch of different stuff and eventually settled, no, the reason I wanted to make videos is to talk about design. I should stop talking about makeup and cooking recipes and stuff like that. And like, let's just talk about design. That's what I'm most passionate about. So yeah, going all in on that has enabled me to get posted on lists like top designers to follow on YouTube, that sort of thing,
Right.
and become quite a well-known design channel. Yeah.
One thing that's interesting to me is that even in choosing that niche to go for design, you haven't gone what I think most people would find the most likely path, which is like a whole bunch of design tutorials.
Mm,
You definitely have design tutorials, but like if I'm looking specifically for how to, I don't know, combine shapes in Figma, your channel is not the like you don't
it
have a
is not going to show
3 minute
up. No.
video of
No.
exactly how to do that. You might have an
Mhm.
introduction to Figma
Yep,
that's like
I do.
yeah, you might. I have watched that video, so that was part of me switching from Photoshop to Figma was watching your introduction to
Yep.
Figma video. Um, it's not hypothetical. But what's the reason for not having like not going tips or tutorial based?
Honestly, it's what I said before about how a lot of my content comes out is making the kinds of things I want to see. And what I wanted to see is the behind the scenes of people's processes and talking through like the decisions they made about a project. Like, why did they do something this way? That's what I care about more than the how. I feel like there's a million tutorials out there to tell you how to combine shapes in Figma or whatever. There's people who are passionate about that and who are really great at explaining things succinctly, and they do it a lot better than I could. And that's just not like the space I'm looking to fill. I want to show people the real life of a professional designer, the projects that I work on, how I work on them, how I make decisions, the challenges I run into along the way. That's the kind of thing that I'm looking to share. And that sort of lens frames all of my content, like not just on YouTube. That is also the newsletter, the book, the anything I tweet as well. It sort of all comes from this.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to be long-term authentic and stay interested in what you're creating.
Yeah.
The like practical side of me is like, but you could do that and have the tips, and that would drive, search results and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's a tension that so many creators have. Like, this is what I want to make, and this is what I know will also get me short-term results. Like, should I do both? Should I split my focus? Is that something you ever thought about or struggled with?
Yeah, that's why I have a Figma 101 video, is because I know that that does do well in search. And I think I'm pretty good at explaining at an introductory level a new piece of software to someone.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't really consider myself a power user of any software. So you're not going to find like a advanced Figma tips video on my channel, because I'm not really an advanced user. I do what I need to. But I think I'm really good at making something that seems scary or new, like a new piece of software that you have to use, feel easy to understand. And so that's the gap I try to fill in that sense to appease the algorithm. Like right now I'm planning a Webflow 101 video to sort of go along with this 101 series that I'm doing. And my hope is that people see that and then stick around for the rest of the more process-driven stuff.
One way that I think helps bridge that gap for people sticking around for your content is that you put your personality and yourself in it, right? We don't dive just into a screencast. Yep. And it's like, if I were to watch a video, like I know I'm watching one of Charli's videos, mm-hmm. right? It's not like any other video that I just found through search.
And I've had comments about that, Nathan. People have said like, oh, why is her face so big on the screen? It's always funny how the negative ones talk about you, not to you. Say, why is her face on the screen so big? And I'm like, well, you're probably not going to like the rest of my videos that are pretty much only my face. So it's okay that you don't like this one.
I don't know if you know this, but you're on my channel.
Yeah. And I'm the one reading these comments. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. If anyone was starting a YouTube channel today, either in the design space or something else, like, what would you tell them? What would you say as far as like that advice to kick it off?
I think ask yourself what is not being talked about, or not being talked about in a way that you personally find useful, or like a perspective that you personally have. In the design space in particular, there's a lot of content about like how to become a UX designer, that sort of thing. So it's like, and it's probably the same for a lot of topics. It's finding your unique angle on it now is important, now that the space is more saturated, and leaning into your personality, because that is sometimes your point of difference, is that there's only one of you. Only you have lived your experience and like has led you to this point. And that could be an interesting angle to put on anything that you want to teach or share. But so that, and also just get freaking started. People seem to like, I don't know, obsess over perfecting their video setup and their audio. And I think it's Roberto Blake who says that your first 100 videos are going to like be not good. I'm not sure if we can swear on this podcast.
You can swear. That's fine.
Okay, they're going to be shit, Nathan. They're going to be shit. Yeah. And so you should just need to get through them and like get in the habit of producing and getting used to seeing your face and hearing your voice. So yeah, if it's something you want to do, get started sooner rather than later, so you can get that awkward stage over with faster. Yeah.
Yeah. And then like gear and everything else, you just like gradually replace one thing at a time and
exactly.
And gradually upgrade it. Okay, you did something last year. No, I'm trying to think 2 years ago. What is time anymore?
Yeah, who knows?
But you made a font, and that's something that I've like looked at. There's like normal people, there's designers, and this is the way that I think. And designers who can make a font. And for anyone who's just listening to the audio, I'm like doing stair step things with my hands.
Yes,
which
you have to imagine that.
But so because that puts it in a category of like, uh, I just think of that as an incredibly difficult thing, and not like a great moneymaker. Like there's a lot of difficult things that are high difficulty and high reward. The effort versus impact, like you're at the top of both, right? And that's the reason, like, okay, great. That's very difficult, but you did it and there's a um, high financial reward. I'm curious the way you thought about making a font, because the way that I see it is that it is very high effort and low financial reward. Um, but maybe the reward and impact comes some other way.
I would say I definitely have not, I don't know, earned even a minimum wage in my sales yet from the hours spent producing the font. I'm just trying to add it up right now because I was sold across a few different platforms, but I think I've earned about £2,600 from it so far, which is like not bad. I don't know what that is in US dollars. Should I Google that quickly?
Sure, let's do it. This will be the episode where we Google everything.
$3,606 is around about how much I've made from the font. So it's not bad.
Yeah, you got 1,000 hours into it, and so about $3 an hour. I don't know.
But the cool thing about it is, one, it was just a thing I wanted to do. I thought it would be fun to try because I'm an avid like font collector myself, and now it is my passive income. Like I earned, the bulk of that income has come in the past year where I've done minimal marketing for the font. I'll like tweet about it or share whenever someone posts like an image of them using it. But there's not been a huge concerted effort gone into that. And so that's kind of cool. It feels it's my first passive income that I feel better about than AdSense, for example.
Right.
Because it's the thing I created, and I don't know, it's more intentional.
Well, then you also get to see it in use around the web.
And that is very fun.
Oh, that's my font.
Yep. It's really fun. It's especially cool because I just created it as a hand-drawn looking font, but people very quickly just started using it as a font to annotate designs because it does look handwritten, and yet it is also like highly readable. And so I really leaned into that as in the way that I frame the font now and the way that I market it is, this is to annotate your designs in a really clear and legible way that still looks handwritten. And we even use it on the ConvertKit website.
We do. It comes full circle.
Yes.
On that note, I want to talk about the intersection between having a full-time job and life as a creator, because I think people would think of it as, I have this, and then maybe I have this one side hustle, or I have and you're able, I think, through the leverage that you've made with like coming into the job with established audience and habits and everything, you've been able to build like a small design empire. And so I'm curious how you think about balancing those two things, and what you'd say to someone else really who is like straddling those worlds.
Yeah, I think getting clear on what you want from these two worlds is important. So for me, it really matters to me that I'm still designing. And so that's why contributing to a project that's bigger than just like my own. That's why I like working at ConvertKit. I do not enjoy freelancing. So like it would be hard for me to really feel fulfilled, I think, freelancing right now anyway. Who knows? That could change in the future. But that's why I am not interested in going full-time on the creating side of things. And so knowing that means I have, I know I'm going to work a full-time job, and I know that creating is also important to me, all this content that I'm making. I don't want to give that up either. So how do I do them both? How do I figure this out? And it's just been a constantly changing, just way that I get this done. When I was younger, 5 years ago, I used to wake up super early in the morning and do a few hours video editing and things like that on side hustles before starting the day. I feel like I'm older and tireder now, and I don't do that.
Yeah.
But what I do now that I'm earning income from my side hustles is pay people to help me. So I pay for editors, I pay for video podcast editing, some VAs who help with my bookkeeping and content management, uploading, that sort of thing, just so that I can really keep the parts I enjoy to do myself and hand off as much as possible of the stuff I don't enjoy. And it's been a worthy investment for me because of, it making it sustainable.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know if you posted this in Slack, or on Twitter or mentioned it somewhere else. But there's a video that you were editing recently yourself, and
Yes.
and that was a bit of a, I don't know, not a wake up call, but like a reminder of like, oh yeah, this is a lot of work.
That was one that I wanted to edit and then put out like 2 days later, and so I knew my editor wouldn't have time for a quick turnaround like that. So it's like, well, I'm just gonna do it myself, and I'm like, "Oh, okay. I remember why I outsourced this."
Yeah, that's even outsourcing something that like you know well and are good at and
Yep.
have done for
Mhm.
many years. But I think what you found in that, or I mean, the point that I want people to take away is like you can actually create really a lot if you set up the systems and
Mhm.
you're willing to let go of the things that you're skilled at, but don't like they're not the thing that makes the content.
Yep.
Like maybe if you and I were filmmakers, right? The editing and having it
Right.
just perfect, right? That would be part of it where we're like, "Oh, wow, that was incredible." Right? But like we're teaching content, we're
Mhm.
sharing things. It needs good editing, but it doesn't like that's not what makes or breaks the video. And so outsourcing that allows you to create so much more content.
Yep, exactly. That's often my answer when people say like, "Oh my gosh, how do you do it all?" I'm like, "Well, I pay people to help me." That's how I do it all. I don't do it all myself.
Yeah. When you like a video that you're making in a given week, I don't know, pick a video. I'd love to hear kind of what your process is. Like, do you just sit down, flip on the camera and start talking, or are you writing a script first? What's your process and like how much time does it take?
Mm. I these days honestly do tend to write a script when it's a video like let's say for example a recent one I uploaded was one explaining the differences between I think it was 5 different job titles in tech that you often see. That is one that I sat down and wrote a script for first. When I film it, I don't use a teleprompter and I don't necessarily read the script word for word, but it helps me process my thoughts
Yeah.
to write it out first. Sometimes I find when I do a video that's just bullet points, it takes me a lot longer to film because I end up like talking about something, and then I'm like, no, I don't like the way I phrased that, or we'll go back and like repeat it a bunch of times. So yeah, getting that out of the way first actually speeds it up for me to spend a bit of time writing. And yeah, I have my filming set up like this background. If you're watching the video version of this podcast, is just where I do my filming, and that makes it pretty easy to just set the camera up, turn it on, and film. I generally like to film more than one video at a time as well, because if I'm gonna like, I don't know, put lipstick on or something, I want it to be worthwhile.
Yeah. That makes sense. What you're saying about writing the script made me think of back when I was doing like design tutorial content. What I would often do is I would know roughly what I was going to make, or like the tip I was trying to share or whatever. And I'd have like an idea of like, here's the fake app that I'm going to use
Mhm.
to do it or any of that, right? And I would record the tutorial and end it, and I'd look at it and say it's like a Photoshop tip and it's 5 minutes long. And then I would set that aside, wouldn't delete it, but like I'd set it aside and then I would reset my like new Photoshop document or whatever, and I would record the exact same tutorial again. And I would look, and if the first one was 5 minutes, the next one was 3 minutes.
Mhm.
And like, and I never wrote a script or anything, but just the action of like doing it twice,
Yep.
it was so much better the second time. And that's what I found was such an efficient process because it still came across naturally, but I like avoided the random rabbit holes that I went down the first time where you're talking like, this is no longer useful. Should I edit this out later? Or,
Yeah, totally. That's I do that sometimes as well when it's more of a off the cuff video. I'll there's been times where I've been like, you know what? I got to the end of my 30 minutes of footage and I feel like I should record this again to make the edit process easier and like so that I'm more clear on what I said and what I didn't.
Right. Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's easier to get clear in the recording, in a second
Mhm.
recording, than it is for your editor to be like,
Yeah. What's she trying to
okay,
say here?
the
Yeah.
version 3 of this plus version 4 of that one, like, there we go. And
Yeah.
we're gonna do a jump cut here, so it seems like it's
Yeah.
it'll be great. Don't worry about it. Are there times that the full-time role and like your side work as a creator, like those have conflicted? Well, I think that's the
Mm.
thing that people are wondering. Like, oh, that's great that it magically all works. I'm happy for you. I'd be happy to share examples as well of times like
Yeah.
that it has conflicted for me.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question because it is often the impression I think that we give across or that I give across to people. And I find myself in weird situations where I'm convincing someone that my life is not perfect, which is weird to like find yourself
Yeah.
doing. But no, you're right, totally. There's I think why it comes across like it all works is because I lean into the moments when I do feel motivation and I do have time
Mm,
to like batch film a video. Like I haven't filmed a video for a month, and there's still been content going out on my YouTube channel because I filmed it when I had time and when I felt like doing it.
right.
Um, but yeah, there's definitely weeks where I can't get what I would like to done on my side hustle because I know that I have to put my job first. And I just have to like accept that that's part of like it's like a compromise you make in deciding to do them both and deciding to
Right.
create on the side means that I'm never going to be able to produce as much content as someone who does it full time can, or like take on every opportunity that someone who
Mhm.
creates full time can. And I just have to be okay with that. Right. And if I start to become not okay with that, that's when I need to like check in with it myself and be like, well, what do I really want to be doing here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that one way that they work really well together is like different creative energy.
Yes,
Like
definitely.
I've spent so much time recently on like where we're going as a company. It's like all these high level things, um, and very little time like as a creator,
Hmm.
which is core to who I am. Like if I were to write down some identity statement, like writer would be pretty high up in there. Writer, designer, um, and so if I get too far away from that, I find that um, I start to feel like disconnected from who I am at my core. But at the same time, like ConvertKit as a company does not need me to be a designer. Like
Mm.
in fact, I often cause more problems if I jump in and be like, let me design this for you. And then Alf or someone else on our design
It's like
team
you
is
didn't use
like,
the design system.
yeah, exactly. Like, hi. You remember how I showed you this whole thing and how you didn't use any of it? And now this is really annoying. Um, and so doing something on the side, yeah, like uh, I started a newsletter just talking about money.
Mm.
Like, um, and doing that on the side has been like a really motivating, like has given me creative energy, even though it's an additional thing. The important distinction is that I had to make sure that it wasn't like a treadmill that I was signing up for.
Mm.
And so it's like going back to, a season of inside marketing design, right? You're like, I have energy. It's going to go towards this, and then it's going to go on pause. And then also like setting it up so it's evergreen, right? So instead of sending um, a broadcast every Friday morning, I set it up so it's an automation in ConvertKit, and it's emails 1 through 5, and they just go out automatically. And when I have energy, I come and write, and like the next email is already ready to go, and I'm working on one a few later.
Mhm.
And then I know that if at any point I stop, like here's this asset that people can keep buying or signing up for, and using, and that like basically that it'll live on. There's a system for it.
Yeah.
Are there other things where you're doing that, or other rules that you have in that space?
Yeah. So maybe a rule that I have is I was finding myself spending a lot of time like reading emails and reading about sponsorship opportunities and like
Oh
partnership
yeah.
opportunities from companies. And often I would like feel like I should explore every avenue because like it's someone who's offering to pay me money, right? Like who am I to
Yep.
say no to that? I should do my due diligence and check it out. But you'd get a few emails in and it would turn out their idea of a sponsorship was like much lower than what your idea of a sponsorship was. The company wasn't a good fit, or I don't know, you didn't love it. And so I just decided that I'm not going to even entertain the idea of a sponsorship from any company, tool, brand, whatever that I don't already know and use and like using
Yep.
myself. And that's just made it really easy. I just have like a text expander auto response that I can just boop, quickly put in to send off to the people who offer me sponsorships that I, have never heard of before or don't use. And sometimes it hurts to like think about leaving money on the table in that way,
Uh-huh.
but I just have to hope it pays off long term and that I'm making those smart choices with sponsorships, and that there's only one of me and I'd rather be creating than emailing a random company.
Yeah, you made a mental model to help
Yeah.
you make that decision, and you
Hmm.
acted on it, and
Hmm.
that has freed up not only if people talk about like you only have so many decisions you can make in a day,
Yes,
and
that exactly.
what font to use for this heading is one of those, like we make a ton of decisions that you're just like, look, that's a whole series of decisions that I'm not going to make.
Yep.
And that frees up creative energy for other things. Cause like, should I take this sponsorship or not is not like a creative question.
Yes, exactly.
It's a
Yeah.
business admin question. That's not so fun.
Yeah, totally. And another thing that I'm in the middle of right now, I said before the Design Life podcast is having a summer break. I'm also taking a bit of a summer break from my newsletter, from videos,
Mhm.
to allow the space to work on season 2 of Inside Marketing Design. And also to spend some time writing my book, which is completely like fallen by the wayside over the past few months. Just got out of the habit of it. And that's important to me. So I don't have the luxury of being able to do those things as well as continuing with the like content hamster wheel of
Mhm.
the other stuff. And so even though it feels like it's quite a risk, especially in terms of the YouTube algorithm, to stop uploading for a while,
Right.
it's what I have to do in order to bring to life this thing that is important to me also. And at the end of the day, that's what's important. Even if my audience on YouTube stays exactly the same and I bring this thing to life, I would rather have that happen than have grown and not made it.
Right. Yeah. I see you like you at 200,000 subscribers now. And what I hear you saying is you'd rather be like, we have this whole string of words that we can use to describe Charlie, and
Uh-huh.
adding author to that
Yes.
is more important than the next 50,000 YouTube
Yes.
subscribers in 12 months or something like that.
Yes. I would like to say I have 250,000 YouTube subscribers. I would really like to say that, but I would much rather say that I'm an author.
You're right
Hopefully
that
I'll get them both one day.
yeah, you'll get both. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
That is an interesting thing of like if you stay consistent and steady, like so many of the things that you want just come with time.
Mhm.
So it's good. Okay, last thing that I want to ask you about is most people listening to this podcast are going to be newsletter creators.
Yep.
Right. So you started on YouTube and went to a newsletter, or added a newsletter in addition.
Yep.
What would you say to the people who have started with the newsletter? Let's say they've got 10,000 subscribers or 15,000, and they're thinking about going to YouTube and adding in video, especially because newsletters, for example, don't have an algorithm behind it.
Yeah.
Right. And so on one hand, you're like, yay, it's a one-to-one relationship. That's fantastic. On the other hand, you're like, hey, there's no built-in distribution. There's no discovery.
Yep.
And so I'm curious what you would say to someone who's thinking about making them jump over to YouTube.
First of all, I think that you should do it because when someone sees you on video, they'll start to imagine the words that you're writing in your newsletter in your own voice, as they read it, and they'll
Yep.
make more of a personal connection with you. I think video is so powerful for that. So every creator I think should try and involve video somewhere in part of what they make. I think that you should make videos about stuff that's a similar topic to your newsletter to like tie into the audience there. And what's worked out well for me is having a fairly educational focused video that is one that I specifically created to do well in search results, to help people out who are searching
Yep.
for a certain topic. Having an opt-in that you offer and like specifically mention it in the video, not just the description, call it out, show a picture of it on screen or whatever, will get the people to join your email list from a video. I found that to be a really good path. Lower conversion rate than you might expect because a lot of people, I don't know, it's hard to get them to take action from a video, but those who do, if the video is on the same topic as your newsletter, they'll stick around and become like a good audience member for you.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. I particularly like the idea of, switching to video as a media type and like saying, great, now people know what you sound like
Mm-hmm.
and go through this whole thing. How do you think about, okay, maybe this is a different question. We host Craft and Commerce every year, right? For ConvertKit. Or
Well,
we haven't
yeah.
for the last
Yeah.
several
Oh,
years.
that just made me
Now
really
we're
sad.
depressed.
Yeah.
But I think about like, let's say two speakers that we've had, Casey Neistat and Mark Manson. I imagine they lead very different lives as far as, right? If Casey Neistat walks to the airport and Mark Manson walks through the airport, they're going to have very different experiences as far as like number of people who recognize them.
Yes.
I imagine that the majority of people who have read Mark Manson's books, and at this point it's like 5 million people or 10 million, like something ridiculous, right? They have no idea what he looks like.
Yeah, I didn't until I saw him at Craft and Commerce.
Right. He walks in, you're like, you know, hey, who are you? You know, he's like, oh, I'm the keynote speaker, whatever. And you're like, great.
Okay
Um,
then. Yeah.
right. Is that something that people should think about of, I guess, the pros and cons of being recognized? Do you have any examples or stories as well
Hmm.
of you being recognized?
I feel like I get recognized sometimes if I'm at either a design or a YouTube event.
Hmm.
I've only had it happen, I think, twice that I've been recognized just like out on the street, and it was in London, where I was living at the time. And
Yeah.
so I don't know, it's weird, but I don't think it should be anything that either deters you or is the reason to make videos, you know?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of nice, and I've enjoyed it honestly at design or YouTube events. As an introvert, it gives like something to talk about. If someone comes up to you, that means, oh great, I'm not having to approach someone else awkwardly. Someone else has made
Yes.
that, taken on that challenge, and now we get to have a conversation, and I can just ask questions about them because they already know about me if they've seen my videos, and that's just a good situation for me to be in.
It is the single best conference hack to
Yep.
have an audience and a persona and all of that. Like the first conference that I ever went to, I think I spoke to two people the entire time, maybe three, maybe, but they were like the person who sat next to me.
Yeah.
I sat at a lunch table and like quietly, and someone said hi, like that kind of thing. And then after I started blogging and went to a conference, and like people were like lining up to talk to me, and I'm like, what?
Whoa.
And I wasn't even one of the speakers, and it was just the best hack of like, I hate introducing myself to people, and I hate like, all that. I've done it a lot more, like the last decade, I've gotten more comfortable with it. Um, but yeah, when people just come up and say like, "Oh, Nathan, I love your blog post," or Charlie, I loved your video, and you're just like, as an introvert, you're like, yes, I
So you're like,
wanted to meet you.
great.
I just didn't want to put in any work.
Yeah.
That's good. All right, well, maybe we'll leave it there. Where should people go to subscribe and follow all the things that you're creating on the internet?
I think the best place would be my website, charliemarie.com. There's links to my blog posts, to sign up for my newsletter in the footer, the videos, the podcasts. They're all on there. The font as
That
well,
sounds
if
good.
you want to annotate your designs.
Yeah, buy the font, use it, send a screenshot to Charlie.
Yes,
That'll
and
be
I will
great.
reshare it on Twitter. Yeah.
I like it. Well, thanks for hanging out. This has been really fun.
Yeah. Good chat, Nathan.